ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Hidden in the desolate plains of Colorado, ADX Florence is America's most secure federal prison, a fortress designed to bury the nation's most dangerous criminals in silence and steel. Opened in 1994 by the Federal Bureau of Prisons, this supermax facility was built to house men who are too dangerous for any other prison. With a capacity of nearly 490 inmates, ADX is home to terrorists, mob bosses, and mass murderers. Each prisoner is kept in a soundproof cell for 23 hours a day, with furniture made of concrete, and their only view of the outside world is a 4-inch window in the ceiling. Movement is tightly choreographed. Inmates are shackled, escorted by multiple guards, and watched by surveillance cameras at all times. Here lives the minds behind the Boston Marathon bombing, the 1993 World Trade Center attack, and the Oklahoma City bombing. It is a place where silence screams louder than words, and where some of the world's most dangerous men will spend the rest of their lives, unseen, unheard, and forgotten. La Sabaneta, Hell on Earth. Once dubbed the most violent prison in Latin America, La Sabaneta in Venezuela was less a correctional facility and more a battleground of survival. Built in the 1950s and designed for just 700 inmates, it eventually held over 3,700 prisoners by the time it closed in 2013. The guards barely entered the cell blocks, leaving gangs to govern the prison like warlords in a forgotten jungle. Weapons, drugs, and homemade alcohol were widespread, and violence was a daily occurrence. In 1994, a massacre claimed the lives of over 100 inmates during a riot, and in 2012 alone, nearly 600 prisoners died victims of disease, neglect, or brutal attacks. There were no beds for most inmates, no clean water, and often no food. Disease and malnutrition claimed as many lives as machetes and homemade firearms. La Sabaneta wasn't just a prison, it was a human rights catastrophe in concrete, where the strong ruled, the weak perished, and the world looked the other way. Black Dolphin, Russia's prison of shadows. Near the wind-swept border of Kazakhstan lies a place that even Russia's deadliest criminals fear, Black Dolphin Prison. Built originally in 1745 and converted to a high-security prison in the modern era, it now houses roughly 700 inmates, all serving life sentences. These are the monsters of society: cannibals, serial killers, terrorists, and pedophiles. The moment they enter, they are blindfolded and forced to walk bent at the waist, a tactic to disorient them and prevent escape. Inside their cells, they are watched by surveillance cameras and checked by guards every 15 minutes. They are forbidden to sit or lie down during daylight hours. Meals last only 90 seconds. The only sounds in the corridors are keys jingling and the shuffle of chained feet. It's a place devoid of hope, where inmates are expected to die slowly, silently, and unseen. Black Dolphin isn't just a prison, it's a psychological tomb. Diyarbakir Prison, Turkey's House of Horrors. In the heart of southeastern Turkey stands Diyarbakir Prison, a stark monument to state brutality. Opened in 1980 following a military coup, it quickly gained a reputation as one of the most oppressive prisons in the world. Originally meant for just 700 inmates, it often held more than double that number during its darkest years. It became infamous for its treatment of political prisoners, particularly Kurdish activists. Inmates were subjected to horrific torture, including electric shocks, beatings, psychological abuse, and even rape. Children as young as 12 were imprisoned and tortured. Hunger strikes, suicides, and deaths in custody became tragically routine. Even decades later, the walls of Diyarbakir whisper stories of cruelty and resistance. Though still in operation, it remains under intense scrutiny from international human rights organizations. It is not just a prison, but a living archive of Turkey's authoritarian past, and perhaps its present. Carandiru, the Brazilian slaughterhouse. Once the largest prison in South America, Carandiru Penitentiary in São Paulo was a breeding ground for chaos, disease, and death. Opened in 1920, it was originally designed to hold 3,500 inmates, but by the early 1990s, it housed over 8,000. Tensions exploded in 1992 when a prison riot led to one of the bloodiest massacres in penal history. Military police stormed the prison and killed 111 inmates, most of them unarmed and many executed at point-blank range. The aftermath exposed the horrific conditions inside: cells filled with rats, rampant disease, especially HIV, and a total absence of order. The prison effectively ran under its own laws. dictated by gang leaders. Carandiru wasn't just dangerous, it was lawless, heartless, and soul-crushing. After global outrage, it was finally closed in 2002 and demolished in 2005, but its ghost still looms large in Brazil's collective memory. Bang Kwang. The Bangkok Hilton, nicknamed the Bangkok Hilton. With bitter irony, Bang Kwang Central Prison is Thailand's most feared correctional facility. Located in Nonthaburi near Bangkok and built in 1933, it holds the country's most dangerous criminals, including death row inmates and many foreigners convicted of drug trafficking. With a capacity of around 3,500 inmates, Bang Kwang is notorious for harsh conditions. Prisoners are shackled for the first 3 months, often confined to overcrowded cells with poor sanitation and little access to health care. Executions, once carried out by machine gun, are now done by lethal injection. Foreign inmates, many unaware of the full weight of Thailand's strict drug laws, often languish here, abandoned and forgotten. Meals are minimal, and medical care is rare. For many, entering Bang Kwang is a sentence not just of imprisonment, but of slow, humiliating decay. Kamiti Maximum Prison, Kenya's forgotten fortress. Just outside Nairobi sits Kamiti Maximum Security Prison, a relic of British colonial rule and a grim symbol of neglect. Built in the 1950s to house 1,400 inmates, it today holds over 3,600, many living in squalid, disease-ridden cells. Over the decades, it has incarcerated everyone from Mau Mau freedom fighters to modern-day political prisoners and gang leaders. Inside, prisoners sleep shoulder to shoulder on concrete floors, sharing buckets for toilets and struggling to survive on minimal food rations. Violence is rampant, medical care is virtually non-existent, and corruption festers among guards and officials. Conditions are so dire that inmates have died of treatable diseases and malnutrition. Kamiti is less a place of rehabilitation and more a purgatory of human suffering. Tadmor Prison, Syria's Chamber of Death. Tadmor Prison in the ancient city of Palmyra is remembered not for its ruins, but for the atrocities committed within its walls. Originally built in the 1930s by the French colonial administration, it became a tool of terror under Syria's Assad regime. After a failed assassination attempt on Hafez al-Assad in 1980, government forces entered the prison and executed hundreds of inmates in a single day. Over the years, Tadmor became notorious for systematic torture, public executions, and indescribable brutality. Inmates were beaten to death, electrocuted, mutilated, all in secrecy. Even after being closed in 2001, it was reopened in 2011 to house political dissidents during the Syrian civil war. In 2015, the prison was demolished by ISIS, not as an act of justice, but as part of their war on history. Tadmor was more than a prison. It was a state-run slaughterhouse. Gitarama Prison, Rwanda's House of Cannibals. In the aftermath of the 1994 genocide, Rwanda's Gitarama Prison became one of the most overcrowded places on Earth. Originally built to house just 400 inmates in the 1960s, it ballooned to over 7,000 genocide suspects crammed into every inch of space. There was no room to sit, let alone sleep. Prisoners were forced to stand for days, sometimes weeks, on rotting feet. Food was scarce, and clean water even more so. The stench of gangrene and human waste filled the air. Inmates resorted to cannibalism, eating dead cellmates to survive. Diseases like typhus and dysentery swept through the overcrowded blocks, killing thousands. Gitarama wasn't just a failure of justice, it was a human catastrophe that shocked even the most hardened observers. San Quentin, death row's last stop perched on the shores of the San Francisco Bay, San Quentin State Prison is the oldest prison in California, having opened its gates in 1852. With a designed capacity of around 3,000, it now houses close to 4,000 inmates, including over 600 on death row. San Quentin has seen everything from gang wars, riots, executions, and redemption stories. While it's modernized over the years, the ghosts of its past linger in its iron bars and echoing corridors. Infamous killers like Charles Manson, Richard Ramirez, and Scott Peterson have all called it home. While some inmates find a voice through rehabilitation programs or the prison newspaper, many others are lost in a cycle of violence and isolation. For death row inmates, San Quentin is where hope ends, a cold, fog-drenched waiting room to the execution chamber.